Hello, happy today again. I love the opportunity. Sometimes when I do a number of shows in one day, it's like my starting is happy today, but I've already started happy today, but it's happy today again. So I'm really excited about this conversation. One, because it's a part of the title, that I forgot to tell you because I'm so excited about the conversation here. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. This is Disconnect to Connect, one word conversations. And within this conversation, we are going to unpack the word one. There is a lot of things that come up when I hear one, and sometimes it feels like it's less than, but many times I am starting to believe it only takes one. It only takes one, and something can happen. So, with that in mind, I will invite my guest up, and we will have a conversation.
Oh, awesome. How are you?
Good afternoon, sir. I am doing
Awesome.
great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So this is the opportunity that I give my guests to introduce themselves however feels comfortable to them.
Awesome. Well, my name is Undrai Fizer. I'm the founder of the Fizer Center for Intuitive Living and also director of the Kairos Institute of Personal Discovery, where we help people who are pursuing a greater dimension of consciousness to develop their personal purpose and spirituality, and to show them how to express it in different ways of creativity, business, governance, and other different ways that they feel to express their newfound purpose. I'm also a two-time candidate for the Texas House of Representatives here in Houston, Texas. I ran in 2018 and 2020. I'm also the founder of Divine House Books and Urban World Press, which is a publishing company for
Hmm.
different wisdom and thought leaders around the country. So basically, I'm just a guy who establishes different empires to express his purpose, and very
Absolutely.
happy about it. Yeah. So thanks for having me.
Um, no, I totally get that.
Oh yeah.
Um, so, how does the word one land for you?
Oh, when I see here one, I think of oneness or sameness with God or sameness with the thought that created me. When you begin to move beyond the rhetoric of religious vernacular and you begin to look at God and know that I began as a thought in God's mind, I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't just a group of people that He decided to establish as Christians in the world, like you're going to be my religious people in the world. No, I was actually a thought in God's mind. And
Wow.
when you begin to feel what God felt when He thought of you, and you begin to seize that moment, your entire life turns or transforms into that same thought that God had when He thought of you. And that's when we break away from the rhetoric. You know, you can't do that if there was no value in the thought of God. But when I hear that, I feel the way God felt when He thought of me, which is achievable,
Hmm.
significant, profound wisdom. I feel that same sameness
Right.
as God. I feel it every day. I
Wow.
love it. Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. I think really embracing that for myself,
Hmm.
it's in the category of simple but not easy, right?
Oh yeah.
There's too often that we're always comparing us to ourselves to the next or to the group or to the many,
Oh yeah.
and we miss the power of one, our
Oh yeah.
oneness, our
Oh yeah.
uniqueness,
Oh yeah.
and
See, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's like the question that I had is why is that, and what is and how can we break away from that?
I don't know. I think we all identify with our own individual problems.
Hmm.
Whenever we identify with our own individual shame and weakness, we can't help but compare ourselves to another. God created everybody, so everybody is one. But when your shame or weakness has devalued you, you can't help but look at a person and compare yourself to that person.
Right.
God created us all as one. But that's what
Wow.
happens. I think we're still guided by our individual insufficiencies. We may not be financially insufficient, but we may be governmentally insufficient. We might feel that we don't have the influence to be heard. You
Right.
can make money, you can have a relationship, but you may not feel that you carry an aura that can be respected. So you're going to look at somebody else. You're going to
Right.
look at somebody else and see how they talk and what they do and how they dress. And innately, you're going to do it. Now,
Right.
it's nothing wrong with the scriptures talk about marking the perfect man. There's nothing wrong with being accountable to a fellow human being or
Right.
to a fellow spirit. But when you begin to compare your significance
Hmm.
to the person, that's when you become caught in this trap. I
Right.
think all of us should be able to look at one another and hold one another accountable and and look at the responsibility that one another bring that we each bring to the table. But don't lose your own worth. And
Right.
that's a responsibility that we have to hold on to ourselves.
Right.
Don't lose yourself
Right.
in the process of it. Oh yeah, but all of us were born as one person, as in oneness with God.
Right. I when we look at what's going on in the in our society and in the
Oh
world
yeah.
today, from the pandemic to some of the
Oh yeah.
protests that are going on, there is this, I don't want to say group think, or maybe that's what it is, right?
Oh yes. Yes.
There is this mentality of the collective. We need to think a certain way, we need to speak a certain way, and all that. And I think somewhere our oneness or the individual is lost within that. And so
Hmm.
how can you connect to a group or a movement or something and still stand up in your oneness?
Well, it depends. Sometimes you can't hear you on behalf of the group. Sometimes we don't know how the collective will hear us.
Right.
And so we can't be too controlled by that. I wrote something today about creating a new trend for yourself. Create new news for yourself. I'm going to always pull this thing back to me because it's easy to get caught in this conundrum of what's going on. And before you know it, you have forgotten your own uniqueness
Right.
to borrow the pain and hatred that's going on in the world. Now,
Right.
I will address the issue, but I will never forget me. I will never forget that I'm a unique thought of God. So I pulled back and I said, create. And I also did a podcast today about it. As a matter of fact, it's called Creating New News for You. Create new news for yourself. Establish a new trend of peace for yourself. Because the issues in life that can distract us can also build us. But we determine how we're going to respond to the issues to
Right.
determine if we're going to be distracted or built up in mastery or not. So as
Right.
I would speak to everybody, remember who you are as a spirit. It might not be what you want to hear because you want to lash out and you want to follow in the protest. And I don't blame you. But don't forget who you are in the middle of the process. I don't know
Right.
how the collective is going to hear me because the
Right.
collective has already adopted the voices that they want to put fuel on what their anger is.
Right.
And sometimes you won't be chosen by the collective, even though
Right.
you're a part of the collective. Know that you have chosen yourself. And so I want to pose a question to those who may be watching. Have you chosen you in the midst of this situation? Have you picked yourself? See, if I haven't chose me, I'm going to always look for people outside of me to choose me. So one
Right.
of the biggest powers is to choose yourself authentically first. Now, to
Right.
many people, this may sound like philosophical rhetoric. People could hear me say this and they could sound like, oh, just, it's nice talk, but it's not reality. We make everything real that we desire to be real.
Right. Got
Yeah.
it. Right. I think that I'm like it's it's a part of the conversation that I have about labels
Uh huh.
and I use two premises depending on what audience I have, and one is Dr. Seuss. There's no one newer than you, right?
Oh, that's right, man.
And so for people that can have that listening, or I'll go to Jeremiah 1:5 that I knew you before the foundations
Oh,
of
yeah.
the world.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and and so the only way that I can really show up truly is to connect to that you that
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss and the scriptures are speaking of.
Yeah.
And too often we are so connected and so bound by our labels, what I call labels,
Yeah.
and our identities, that we can't even get to us.
That's right. Well, this world has been constructed by labels. Most of our industry and the school of thought in the world was developed by labels. It wasn't developed by identity. A lot of us refrain from our identity because it's not easily acceptable or approachable or understood. So when this is what I mean. If someone was to talk to me or talk to you, they would say, "What do you do?" And you would say, "My name is William Brown. I'm a this."
Right.
You don't say I'm a God image. You say I'm a this. You would identify with where you get money.
Right.
You identify by the thing that pays the bill. What are you? What are you? I'm a professor. I'm an
Right.
artist. I'm a musician. I'm a thing. No
Right.
one was interested in what my identity was because we don't relate to identity. We
Right.
relate to labels. But
Right.
when we live, people will get a touch of who we are as we
Right.
express what we are beyond what we do.
Right.
Because this industry, it wasn't made or established by our identity. It's up for us who know who we are to
Right.
live in the profoundness of that. That's what this oneness is all about. People
Right.
could hear you talk, but it's the world that you create for you that determines the power of the oneness of your life. Because we live in a world with so many people that have so many different things that they think about and so many
Right.
things that affect them. Most people are not thinking about God in them. They're not
Right.
thinking about God and their identity. They're thinking about money. They're thinking about their health. They're thinking about sex. They're thinking about children. They're thinking about
Right.
business. They're thinking about when's the check coming. They're not thinking about their divine reason. They're not even
Right.
they're not even considering that. It's at the bottom of the pole. But
Right.
when you live from the sameness as God, it determines the world that you create for yourself that others will feel the energy of when they're around you. What
Right.
worlds are we creating? We're in this world, but not of it. So
Right.
that means all of us have the power to create our own world, our own vibration. And
Right.
from that vibration, we coexist with other people who are not thinking about the God that we're talking about, not even
Right.
thinking about it. As a matter of fact, God and ministry are the things that people forget most of in times of trouble.
Wow.
Because whatever it is that you don't survive from, you could easily forget. See, the reason oneness means so much to me and oneness means so much to you, you may find that your very survival is dependent on it. To most people, their survival is not based on a wisdom of God. They may go to church, but they don't survive from that principle. Jesus
Right.
said this that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. Now, most people who don't survive from the kingdom are thinking that Jesus is talking about preaching. Well,
Right.
he's not saying you can't live without preaching. Obviously, with this pandemic, you can live without preaching. but there is
Right.
a word, there is a thought, there is a perspective, there is an imagination from God that you should find your very survival in, which will
Right.
cause you to keep a level mind in the place of chaos. And
Wow.
most people, because of this chaos, they're easy to forget God because they never existed from God in the first place. Even though they've gone to church, even though they've
Right.
sung in choirs, they don't find their existence in it. Whatever you don't
Right.
find your existence in, you could easily forget about and be lax in it. But
Right.
those of us who
Wow.
find our efficiency and essentialness in the kingdom, when this pandemic came, you notice our life really didn't change much.
Right. It
We
shifted a little.
maintained a certain reality
Right.
because our lives wasn't flirting with non-essential things in the first place. So when they closed certain things down, we didn't feel it. We wasn't going there anyway. When they
Right.
stopped certain
Right.
things, we didn't feel it. Why? We stopped going there a long time ago. Whenever you live in the juggernaut of your purpose and your oneness with God, you'll find that your life really never changed in the midst of all of this.
Wow. Here's the other thing: the conversation around self and that oneness and our
Yeah.
connectedness to God. Um, there's a conversation that I believe this is a mature conversation, right?
Oh, okay.
Because if we don't um, if there's not a maturity within the conversation around oneness and self and
Yeah.
understanding of self, it can get very childish. It can get very selfish. It could get really not centered on other people.
Yeah.
How can you balance your um, your understanding of yourself and the oneness without saying it's me and Jesus, right? And
Oh,
nobody
yeah,
else, and I don't
definitely.
care, right?
Whatever you love, you focus on. You don't have to say me and the Lord. If something is a love of mine, I'm doing it.
Right,
And when I was a kid, when I was a little boy, I liked sports. When I was sick, I wasn't well enough to go to school. But when I heard my friends bouncing the basketball outside on my street, I could hear the basketball pouncing up against the street. I always
right,
felt well enough to play. I wasn't well enough to go to school because they had something that I valued. And whenever I heard something that I valued beyond my present condition, I was always strong enough to do it. I was always strong enough to go
wow,
outside wearing my pajama pants and because my parents were at work and I could sneak outside and shoot a little basketball and get back in the house because I'm sick. Well,
right,
that's the same thing when you discover the value of your divine nature. When you discover the value of your divine nature, when you value it as something you're playing with,
right,
as and see that's one thing most people have not learned about Christ is still an obligational moral spirit. I'm
right.
not weak enough to
Get
do
it?
it, so I'm not perfect. So everyone who's Christian claims to be unperfect. In other words, don't expect much out of me. I'm not perfect. I'm honest, and
Right,
I'm honest.
right,
So and don't expect nothing out of me. I'm not where I used to be, but I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I used to be. Be patient with me. But whenever you
right,
connect with something you want, no one needs patience. Why?
right.
Because this is something I
Wow.
want. And so we still look at Christ as some spiritual obligation instead of a joy. So whenever you have joy, authentic joy with something that shows no obligation to, you're healed. You're there. So I don't
Right,
have to say me and Jesus. It's the
right,
energy of feeling the joy of who I am that
right,
causes me to transcend my present chaos. And that's what most people, I can't tell how the percentage, I don't know that. But I don't know
right.
how many people have found an authentic joy that gives them an authentic ability to transcend chaos. and look at it as though I'm playing with my friends. Because that's how I've always looked at
Right.
Jesus. Like, this is my big brother. When I lived in Louisiana,
Right.
we had a field. And I would feel, and a lot of people who may be watching, do you remember those mason jars and curd jars? Well,
Oh yeah. Okay.
my grandfather used to have a water in the refrigerator, and my grandmother would pour it and fill it up with water in a mason jar. Well, I would get two mason jars or two curd jars that had like she would put her preserves in the jar, but they were empty jars, and I would fill them up with water and put them in the refrigerator. The
Okay.
following day, I would take those two jars and some food, put it in a bag, and walk in the fields, and me and God would have lunch.
Hmm.
God was like that was my father, and I would talk to him. I would say, "Hey, and what you doing today? What you wanted?" I talked to him un King James version like, and
Hmm.
Jesus was my brother, and because I always felt like he was my family, I could hear him talk, and I could understand the scriptures. I could even understand things beyond the scriptures, and it wasn't because I was good, because I was a young
Right.
man still doing mannish stuff. I still did
Right.
things. Oh yeah, I did all that. I did all that. And so, but I would talk to Jesus like we were the same person. And
Yeah.
I felt this energy that said I wasn't wrong about it. And I would feed God, and I would eat the food, and I would eat my food, and I would give God his food. And we would sit there and have lunch together. And we did it every day. I never
Wow.
saw God as a moral obligation, and I had to be saved so I could stop cussing, and I had to do this to be a
Right.
Christian. I never came to God to be a Christian. I walked with God because I felt like him.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
when I hear that word oneness and sameness, I didn't come to God because of sin. I remembered that I already was with him. I
Right.
remembered being with him more than I came to him. So
Wow.
our experiences are going to be different, and my vernacular may be different than other people who came to God because they committed adultery, or people
Right.
who fornicated or lied and cussed and did things, people who was in jail and prison. And I don't deny that. My experience may be different than those who came to God for another thing. I don't have a
Right.
problem with God. I don't have a
Right.
problem with him. I don't have a problem growing. I don't have a problem when I have to learn. I don't have a problem if I found out that I was wrong and I need to correct it. I don't feel like I'm going to hell. I don't have a feeling like I'm going to hell if I, no, I just straighten it up. I just, oh, okay, that's what
Right.
I do. Yeah.
I think, I really, there's a couple things that you said that kind of brought some things up for me. Is one, how I now look at my language around, I'm a work in progress.
Oh
No,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a work in progress. I'm a work that I need to work out, that I'm working
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's not in progress. It
Yeah.
started and completed. I'm a completed
You're a
work.
completed individual that's
Right.
in the progress of learning how complete you are.
Right. Well, and that's a totally different stand from,
Yeah.
don't expect much from me that I because
I know, right?
I'm barely whatever,
Dallas
right?
say, yeah, don't expect much. Yeah.
Right. Right. And it is just really. I also believe that some of the challenges that I had within my faith
Uh-huh.
it wasn't with God. It was with people's understanding of God and how it was showing
Oh
up in my
yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And so I spent more time upset with their understanding instead of getting understanding for myself.
That's
Instead
the
of
yeah.
really having that friend relationship, that brother, let's go to lunch or something. But I was
Yeah.
so conditioned to what pastor was saying, what my mom was saying, what
Yeah.
a sister mother over here said, and all that other kind of stuff, and trying to reconcile my life through that versus what we say of a personal relationship
Yeah.
that never got personal because it was still on their understanding of what it was.
Yeah. You were saved on their terms and not yours.
Right? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Understand that completely. Yeah. Because we're taught. we're sort of in environments where we're saved on somebody else's opinion and other people's terms and other people's
Mm.
judgments. And so you're always concerned about what they're going to say. But you
Right.
never determine what you were going to say because we were taught that was pride. We were taught that
Right.
that was being arrogant. When really
Mm.
pride is when you live too low and think it's all right. Pride is
Hmm.
not living the mind of God, it's living the mind of limitation, thinking that's okay.
Right.
Pride is when you live beneath God, thinking it's right.
Right.
When you live
Wow.
beneath your divine mind, we were not conditioned with the permission, and it's almost like another form of prejudice. Who gives me permission to do? It's like one culture giving you the permission to vote. So if one culture
Right.
gave me the permission to vote, that culture is really telling me this is their land. If one culture
Right.
has to change a law to accommodate me, that's one culture saying we have the privilege of allowing you to step in, but only so far. You
Right.
see, yeah, it's
Wow.
one culture who's had the privilege of not experiencing the pains that they have subjected other cultures to have. That means
Right.
they never experienced KKK. They've never experienced people on
Right.
horses lynching them. They were spared from their own doings.
Right.
And so when you look at it in religion, it's like, who gives me the permission to be one with God? Who
Right.
who gave me that permission? And so these political prejudice and biases has gone down in our bloodstream to the point that someone has to give me the right to think for myself. When really you
Right.
have your own power to think for yourself and manifest that power. We are the glory of God. We are the glory of God, not just the church on Sunday. Who I am
Right.
is God's glory. I'm a
Right.
I'm, it means I am a product of God's brilliance. That's glory doesn't mean shining light, even though it's light. Glory is you are a functionable product of the invention of God. I am God's workmanship.
Right.
I'm the glory of God. I am the manifestation of the thought he had. So you see
Right.
God's glory. And a lot of times we're taught you can't share your glory. God's not going to give you his glory. I am his glory. I am
Right.
it. You are his glory. But that's too
Right.
much for us to fathom without feeling that we are cult or heretic or new age or we're arrogant. So we deny ourselves psychologically in being the
Mm.
glory of God, and we relegate ourselves to common humanity. I'm just a nobody trying to tell everybody about somebody that could save everybody. That's all. I'm just a nothing. But whenever you say you're a nothing,
Right.
you are denying the brilliance of God. You are something.
Right.
And so what we
Yeah.
would do is
Go ahead.
adopt Paul's mentality of the scripture instead of adopting Christ's mentality.
Right. No, I totally get it. I have been, on my spiritual journey, that balancing act or the dance of recognizing the smallness of my life and the bigness of my life.
Yeah,
And it's just like the, being humble, but
yeah,
not letting that humility keep me from everything that my life is calling me to.
yeah.
And it is that, like you were saying, that we say things like you're getting, your britches are getting too big or something, right? You're too big for
Yeah.
your britches and
Oh,
all that other
yeah.
kind of stuff. Or
Too big for your
you know,
britches.
or worse, you're smelling yourself. I don't know if you ever heard that. Yeah, I
Oh,
heard
I
that
heard
too,
that. Yeah, I heard that.
right? So it's like it is just, but how can it's like almost keeping us from understanding and appreciating our oneness,
Oh, yeah.
even going to have inquiry about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're going against, if even the search or the curiosity of, is this true, or is this
Oh, yeah.
is this something that I need to tap into?
Yeah, I remember that coming up as a young man. That's in my family. You experience that in your family and stuff. Too
Right.
big for your britches, smelling yourself. You even have friends who mean well, who
Mm.
It's a word that we would say, you won't let me be great, won't you? Jesus
Mm.
experienced that situation when folks didn't want him to be great, which, in other words, I'm not going to respond or acknowledge your full potential. Uh,
Right.
when you begin to step into your heart, into who you are, you may have friends that say, "We're gonna help you stay humble. We're gonna keep you
Right.
grounded. That's I'm
Right.
gonna keep you from soaring to the sky." They call it
Right.
getting a big head, but
Right.
they're really saying we're gonna keep your mind from exploding and who you really are. We're gonna keep you grounded. We're not gonna jump every time you move. We're not gonna say you did well. We're not going to
Right.
invest in it. We know you need it. We have the money. We're not going to give it to you. We're going to hear you talk about it. And if you
Right.
can drag yourself to the finish line, that's all right. But we're not going to help you because if we connect to this wagon, oh, you think we're your followers? And so
Right.
they try to keep themselves from being your disciples or being your
Mm.
followers in their mind. You're going to stay where we are. We're not going to
Right.
let you rise up. And if you believe in your friends and your family more than you believe in why you were born, you're going to always stay in that prison. Why? Because you
Wow.
believe in them more than you believe in you. You found
Wow.
reasons to believe in them. You haven't found a reason to believe in you to the point that it will separate you and cause you to be transcendent above them because I don't want to
Right.
leave my base. See, your base is really the people that believe in why you were born, not the people you live with. Just because you live
Hmm.
with them don't mean they're your base. Just because they've been your friends in school doesn't mean they're your base. Your base is
Right.
going to help you fly because they're flying too.
Right. Wow.
Oh yeah, I've been
It
there,
brings me
man.
back. It brings me back to the a book I wrote, a children's book
Uh huh.
last year actually. It's called Beyond the Shell, finding you beyond what protects you.
Oh, okay, I like
Um,
that.
and there is a line. The question throughout it is, what makes you you?
Yeah,
And there was a number of things. Is it your kin or the color of your skin? So it was, and it's go through is the way you talk or the way you walk. And it's like all the things that we kind of grab onto that
yeah,
we feel that's a part of our identity.
yeah,
I in the book that starts the second book of what makes you you is all up to you, basically
yeah.
what you're willing to look at.
Hmm.
It's all of those things and none of those things, so go
Wow.
be you, right? And it's like the really I think because we were talking about the collective before,
Hmm.
that there is this mindset that if everybody was being had an awareness of self, there would be chaos. We couldn't control you.
Yeah.
It's like we wouldn't get anything done. But I don't think that's really the case. I think
No,
it's
that's
the
not true.
opposite.
That's
The
right.
more
It'll be
that the more that people know what themselves, then they know how they can show up together
that's
and to
right.
do things and how
You'll
they can
really see what
contribute.
freedom is. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. You'll really see what freedom is when we know who we are. You'll really see what the ultimate freedom is. Sometimes when we try to find out who we are, we go through phases of who we are. Sometimes we think we are our personality. Who are you? And you begin to describe your anger or your sadness or why you shy. Well, I'm shy because I don't talk in front of anybody. Well, you go through phases of knowing who you are beyond your personality, beyond how you've had to react to people who've made you sad or inferior or complex. And as you grow, you break away from your personality and you go beyond what you do for a living. And then as you grow, you break away from your job description to your eternal description and what your
Right.
eternal
Wow.
specs are in law. So we go through phase of discovery, breaking away from personality, breaking away from who we are as a manager. I was the first black guy to do this, and I'm the first. They don't have a lot of blacks that work in this department. I was the first black, and after a while, you go beyond being the first color working
Right.
somewhere. I'm working with a lot of white folks, and so you got that big job now, and so that's how we kind of talk on the cuff. And then after a
Hmm.
while, after you discover destiny and purpose, you begin to discover who you are as an eternal expression. But like I said, we
Right.
only know from what we survive from. We don't always know
Hmm.
who we are by what we hear. We know who we are by our present level of survival. If
Hmm.
I wasn't a good student in school and I graduated or I got a GED, or I've been held back a couple of times. When I finally get out of school and I got a little job, and I'm making it, but I really don't feel strong mentally and intellectually, and I'm around people who constantly know how to put their words together. I'm constantly around people who know how to write and who have a philosophical discourse. I don't have that. So I will
Right.
say I'm this, and I will probably feel inferior to people who know how to talk. I will probably feel inferior and feel that they're talking about me because I don't have an understanding that's mature. After I
Hmm.
grow from my personality, I have to grow from what I do for a living. Most
Right.
people have yet, like I said, I'm being redundant, most people have yet to survive from who they are yet because
Hmm.
they're still surviving from shock and trauma and feeling
Right.
incomplete and feeling inferior. And the tragedy is when we are still in a complex inferiority situation and we're over 50 years old and over 60
Right.
years old and we're still living in that. And all of a
Right.
sudden, our churches and ministers would take on the same essence of our weakness because you have leaders who are still living in their personality, who may be gifted to
Right.
preach, but they haven't been set free in their consciousness. So the church is in poverty, even though it's a big place and even though they have organs and synthesizers and everything. The
Right.
mentality of the people is yet in poverty because this module has yet to teach people their God nature. It could only teach them that they're Christians and don't cuss and don't drink, and one day the Lord gonna come get you and stuff like that
Right.
because they haven't
Right.
grown in the consciousness of themselves. They haven't learned to survive from the reason they were born. And this awakening
Right.
doesn't come to a church, it comes to an individual. And once this
Right.
awakening comes to an individual, they have a choice to make. Do I stay here or do I go? Do I
Right.
try to bring this energy here or do I go? What
Right.
do I do? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I'm just I I I don't say I have difficult conversations with my mom since I've been using the label because I said to her once that well, my Christian label, and she says, well, stop that, I can, you can have all the other kind of labels, but you don't have a Christian label. You're a Christian, period.
Yeah.
There's no label. And I was like, okay, mom, right? So, but we're gonna read to disagree on this one, right? And I'll keep my
Yeah.
mouth shut. So, because I honor and and love and respect,
Oh
but
yeah.
there's a level of not letting those label go and saying that that's who we are, and we forget what that. I think the one thing that I wanted to add in as we we're coming up closer to the end
Okay.
is that how can we really stay on the journey to connect to our oneness, and not ignore the traumas, the hurts, the difficulties that we're experiencing. I don't want to say on the way to or throughout that, because sometimes it feels like people think that when I am in this inquiry of wondering who I am and how I'm going to show up, I'm dismissing the reality that things suck, or
Oh,
things are terrible, type of thing. So
yeah.
how can we do both?
Well, it's personal. You could look at things as they suck or it's stupid. It's there is no book to tell you how to look at life.
Wow, got it.
I'm on dialysis. When it happened, I didn't like it. My father died because of it. That was the only experience I had. My father died, and when my kidneys failed, I was in a hospital for one thing. and my kidneys failed the next day. And all I could think of was my father and how he looked and how his color changed and how he gave up and how he later died. I was depressed temporarily because that was the experience I had. And that was all I remembered. And the doctors are telling me that I could either be dead in a year or I could live for 30. And the doctors are telling me how much water I could drink a day, what to eat, what I can't do anymore. And yeah, it sucked. I didn't like it. I was hurt. I was angry. And I was in a hospital almost 2 weeks. When they let me out of the hospital, they couldn't release me from the hospital unless I had a dialysis center to go to. They let me out of the hospital Thursday night. I had to go to a dialysis center that Friday morning. I remember my wife telling me when I got up, have a good day. And I just looked at my wife like, you don't know what you're talking about. Just say, have a good day. I got to the dialysis center early that morning. They didn't have my paperwork together. I was upset. I wasn't cussing, but I was thinking it. And I didn't like where I was. But something happened over that weekend. I started to rethink some things. I don't know where it came from. I just started to rethink. Because one thing I noticed, when you walk in your divine nature, even though life may not give you what you want, it's not going to let you. What you really believe won't let you stay down. Belief is not an intellectual thought that you maintain as information in your head.
Right.
A belief is when the consciousness has been arrested by a value. When your
Wow.
consciousness has found itself to be arrested by a value, it will permeate through your body. It won't let you defeat yourself. It won't let you remain. As a matter of fact, it'll let you taste defeat so you could know what it tastes like, so you can know how to address it in life
Wow.
to others who have it. So I tasted a lot of bitter things. But something happened that Saturday that totally rejuvenated me. And when I went back that Monday, I had a different feeling. I didn't give it to myself. I had a different one. To the point that every time I went to treatment, all of us were laughing, cracking jokes. To the point that when I got transferred to another clinic, everybody cried. My nurses cried. The patients cried. I got to a new clinic, and all of a sudden that we're doing the same thing. So my life will cause certain people to forget they're disabled
Right.
because
Wow.
I begin to tap in who I am beyond what I'm going through. To the point my doctors asked me, have you got on the transplant list yet? I said, no, this experience is still teaching me. I haven't learned everything yet.
Wow.
So that's my personal way. But there is no book to tell you what to do. I think if books tell you what to do, without your consciousness actually teaching you how to do and why to do, you're just going to be learning a lot of answers that you won't even be using.
Right.
You'll say,
Wow.
I read in a book one day to somebody, and you're still not
Right.
experiencing the same oneness of the information. I read in a book one day that I heard a thought, but you still haven't adopted it for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, so life is as crazy as your response to it, or
Right.
life is still as beautiful as your response to it. Even though I see the ugly, I
Right.
decided I'm going to create some new news for myself. I'm not going to George Floyd myself forever.
Wow.
I'm not going to protest and Black Lives Matter myself, even though it does. I'm not going to do that in my world for the rest of my life.
Right.
I'm not going to, what do the white folks say, and racism. I'm not going to be in racism the rest of my life, even though I know it exists. I don't exist for it. I'm in the
Right.
kingdom, which is the consciousness of peace within myself. And
Right.
I'm living in my world, and I'm not of this world. That's what
Right.
I choose to do.
Wow. We could talk about this for hours, and and I'm
I
sure
know,
we'll
right?
have we have many more conversations. But if there is one thing, I like that one thing that people can walk away with today, what would it be?
You're greater than you think. You're more powerful than you imagine. But you have to imagine it, and you have to arrest the imagination. You can do more than you imagine, but you have to imagine it, and you have to be a person who survives from that imagination. See, whatever it is that we're not living from, we won't keep. We'll hear it. We might even remember it, but
Right,
it's not going to do anything for us. Why? Because we're living from something else other than this source.
right,
See, God is a source that don't want to be learned. He want to be lived from. He don't want you to learn him. See, if I learn something that I don't live from, it's just information that I have. Oh, I know how to do that.
right.
But when I live from the thing, it becomes my career. How many of you on this call can say that your belief is your career? Yeah.
Wow.
Oneness is my career, man.
Wow. And I see it, man. I see it. And thank you for sharing it with us.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
this has been incredible.
Thanks,
And
man. I appreciate you.
I'm I believe it. Some people might not believe this, but I met you almost a week ago.
Yeah,
Not
not
even
even a week.
7 days ago, right?
Not even seven.
And so it's like, yes, I would love to have a conversation with this gentleman.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I
Thank
was
you.
so glad that it worked out. So I'm going to put you back in the green room. I'll end the show, and then we'll say our goodbyes from there. But
Thank you. I
thank you.
appreciate you.
Okay,
Bless you.
wonderful. The the oneness, the oneness, embracing that. I think I have embraced that I have an actionable awareness of myself. And because of that, it causes me to move. And the more that I live in that and the more that I appreciate that, the closer I can get to my oneness. And so I not just appreciate you listening into this conversation, but look at your oneness. Have a little curiosity or inquiry of how you're showing up. And I think you'll be amazed of what's available to you, what's available to us all. The world wants you, the world needs you, and the world is waiting for you. So go be you. See you tonight at 8 o'clock for my one more just join in conversation that I'm having. Join in the conversation. I'm still learning what that show is, but we'll be live on this page and our YouTube page at 8 o'clock. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of the evening.